Great. Hey, I'm Sue Hanley, and I'm an information architect and business analyst. And I have been working with communication sites since before they came out, because I have a client that was very, very anxious to try them out. And I'm going to share with you some of the things that we've learned about some really sort of interesting hints and tips about using communication sites. So first, I have a question for you. What is the scarcest resource in any organization? Right? Time. And so I really believe that our goal as people who are creating communication sites is to make sure that we give the people who come to our sites what they need in the shortest amount of time. Because they're really not coming to hang out. They're coming to get information that they can then use to make a decision or to do something that they need to do. So we need to figure out how can we create our sites to deliver what people need. And I really think that we need to approach our communication sites from the perspective of a story. We need to think about creating a site that tells a story for the people who need the information. A story that helps people get what they need quickly when they need it and allows them to get their work done. But if your users are anything like mine or my granddaughter, they're probably a little bit confused about just what is this communication site thing. And I find that I have to explain a lot what is a communication site versus what is a team site. And so, in fact, I usually start telling this story by trying to think about the difference between the getting work done, which is what we typically do in the team sites in which we're sharing and collaborating, and telling that story for people who are mostly going to consume that information on a communication site. So for the most part, these are just sites in SharePoint. They have very, very similar capabilities. They have similar web parts, the same web parts. However, what's primarily different is that the team site is backed by an Office 365 group, and a communication site the permissions are driven by traditional SharePoint groups. So when you create a communication site, another difference is that there are likely going to be a small number of authors and a large number of consumers. So communication sites really are for telling those stories. I often think about the difference as being the team site is where you make the sausage, and the communication site is where you sell the sausage. And no one really wants to know how the sausage gets made, they just want to consume the sausage. And what's interesting about communication sites is that, like potato chips, you're probably not going to have just one. And that might be a little scary in the organizational context. And I think the reason you need more than one communication site to tell your story is that stories have a beginning and an end, just like work has a beginning and an end, and events and initiatives have a beginning and an end. And by creating an individual communication site for each unit of work, each initiative, each major event, you have an opportunity to delete or decommission that story when it's no longer relevant without impacting the rest of your big picture story. So I think if you're doing this right, you're going to have lots and lots of sites, lots of team sites, one for each team, and you're going to have lots of communication sites based on the different kinds of work that you're doing. But every single one of those sites has to tell a story. And just like when you're writing a story, a really effective website starts by understanding who the readers or the visitors are for your story. Really important to know who they are, what kind of language or jargon makes sense to them, and to make sure that as you're creating this story that you're writing using their vocabulary. Very often I'll work in organizational departments where they know their stuff. They know the terms that they use to classify their information and their documents, but the people who are visiting that site, their readers, may not know or think in those same terms. I was doing a project we were creating a travel site, and the organizational framework that the site owner wanted to use was sort of modes of transportation. I tried to convince them that the way I would think about travel is kind of before I travel, while I'm traveling, and when I return. But in his case, couldn't get him over that. He loved the idea, but wasn't quite ready to create that asset. So we're going to basically have content on the communication site for different modes of transportation, whether you're traveling by air or car or staying in a hotel. And where we got into an issue was that he wanted to call ground transportation, which is I'm not driving myself, I'm taking a car service or something like that. The page was going to be titled Livery. And I said to him, well, gee, I think I know what that means, but I don't use that term in common transport. What do you really mean by that? And he said, well, this is a very common term in the travel industry. And I said, well, I mean, you have to think about the readers of your site. Are they in the travel industry or not? I really wanted to call the page ground transportation. What I learned about that as an information architect, sometimes you have to choose your battles. And so the page is called ground transportation / livery. Both terms are searchable. But everybody wins. But the most important thing is that it's not what you know, it's what the consumer of the information needs to know. So it's really important, again, to understand what's important to the person coming to your site, not just the person who knows that content really, really well. So when I am thinking about how to tell that story on a communication site, I actually ask my site owners, the people who know the content, to create a user story, to think about who's coming to this site, what kind of people are coming here, what do they need to do, and why do they need to do that? And what that does, writing in this user story format, what this does is it helps create a North Star for the site. Because, I think when it comes to a communication site, every bit of content has to earn its right to be on that site. And once it's there, of course, the owner has to make sure they keep it current. But most importantly, it has to really fit with the story. So by asking site owners to think about who's coming to the site and what they need to do, we can now structure those pages so that the reader's needs are going to be delivered front and center. So these are really, really helpful. And the other thing we can do when we create this user story is that we can also then ask, how will we know if we're successful? And that will also help guide how we tell the story on our site. So I really do make people do this. And I'm going to share with you in a little bit a template that you can use to help get your site creators to think about this. And what I tell people is don't use the template verbatim if you don't want to, but this is the one page that you should really think about. Have this in the back of your mind at all times as you're creating the content, because you have to keep the reader in mind as you're writing a story. And it's way too easy because we know so much about our content and we're so passionate about it to think about what we want to promote rather than what the reader needs to consume. So you want to think about how your readers are going to plan their journey through your story. And most websites are created with a combination of pages. And I think in general, there are two types of pages. One type of page is a navigational page. And when you land on a navigational page, you're pretty much presented with categories of information that will allow you to make a choice, kind of a choose your own adventure. And that will help you decide which category of information do I want to go to next. When you are at a point on that journey where you're going to consume, download, or read content, that's a different type of page. That's more of a destination page. And sometimes destination pages will have friends or ancillary pages because we may want to present a small amount of, actually we do want to present a small amount of information, but we may need to have some extra explanation for someone who's not quite as familiar with the content. So when you think about it, there'll be these two types of pages in your story, and you're going to combine them in a way that allows your readers to consume that content. And the most important thing I've learned about creating websites is that no one reads on the web. Absolutely no one. They skim or they scan. They're not going to read. So you might as well think about that when you're creating your content. And we learn in school how to write in a very structured format. We typically learn that you have a topic sentence and 3 supporting points and then a summary at the end. And that model really completely doesn't work on the web. In fact, on the web, we have to create pages. We have to write upside down. We have to write using what they call the inverted pyramid model, more like the way a journalist writes, with the most important content at the top and then ancillary content or supporting content as you read your way down. As you are creating pages in communication sites, you can't write them as if they were a document, because they're not documents, they're pages, much more consumable as pages, but we have to think differently as we write them. We have to put space, white space between our paragraphs, one concept per paragraph, the most important content at the top, and think about everything else as being more subheads. There's some data that says that, that your readers will consume most of their content. They'll spend about 57% of their time on the first 2 pages, first 2 swipes, if you screenfuls of information. And the challenge that we have is we don't know the size of the device on which people will be consuming our information. And that data doesn't matter what size it is. So we really, really, really need to have the most important content at the top of the page, because that page could be really tiny if they're consuming it on the phone. So think differently about how you write information, and don't try to bombard people with so much content. Use hyperlinks to provide definitions or ancillary content that doesn't directly relate to your topic. My favorite part of all of these sites, and if you've gone to any of the SharePoint demos, what you notice about all of those sites is there's a lot of imagery, because our goal is to sort of tell a story with pictures. And you're going to need a lot of images to tell your stories. One of my favorite new features of SharePoint is that we are going to be able to control the images that people use, restrict them to, let's call it a brand library of images if we need to. But if you aren't going to have restricted images, you're going to need high-res, gorgeous images that relate to the concepts that you want to present on your site. And these are some of my favorite sources of free imagery. I use the top 2 the most, constantly actually. And they each allow you to search by topic. And one thing I will tell you is that the most important thing I've learned about imagery is that it has to relate to the topic. Don't put an image on a page just because you can. Use imagery because it helps tell you your story more effectively. I've seen way too many sites where people use images because they have an opportunity to use images, but when I've done usability studies, what I find is that if the image doesn't relate to where the content has to go, to the path, that people are still going to be reading it anyways, and so you might as well just use words at that point. So the image really has to work with the story. I usually say it has to pass that 5-second test. Like if you drop a lollipop on the floor and you pick it up in the 5 seconds, it's okay for the kids to eat it, at least if it's your third child. Certainly not on the first where you'd sterilize it. I think the image has to really work with the story. So if you can't relate to what their content is in 5 seconds, you probably need to choose a different image. I was testing a new feature of the new cropping feature of images, and I learned something very interesting, that you can crop an image on a page. So again, this is all about the grandchild. There's a little picture of Hannah where I cropped out her parents in a news article. But when the news article shows up in the news web part, there's mom and dad in the picture. So that cropping is page specific. The image itself is still the big image. So if you want to cut out Jamie and Evan, you have to cut them out before you upload to the site. So one of the things I've learned is you really need to encourage news authors to put an image on every news page. Because when the news summary rolls up, the news pages that don't have an image look really silly against all the news pages that do have an image. You do not need to use a banner image on news pages. Any image will work. So if there's no banner image, the news roll-up is smart enough to find any image on the page and put it in the roll-up. So that's actually really cool, because when we're writing stories about new hires or people who are getting promotions, we usually want the image to be a picture of the person. And the challenge, of course, is if you put that person's image in the banner, you're basically getting, sort of this much of their face. So you don't need to put an image in the banner. You should basically try and use portrait not portrait, landscape style images so that they'll roll up really nicely in the image viewer and work really nicely on the page. The other thing we don't really have to worry about anymore is the size of our images. And that is a big bonus when you're getting people to create content who aren't in communications, because they don't even know they have the superpower to reduce the pixel size of an image. The nice thing about the modern page is that all of that will get taken care of for you automatically. So upload your high-res image, and when it's delivered to your page, Microsoft will sort of make it the right size for the bandwidth that you have, which is really huge. My other favorite feature about Pages is what allows our pages to make some friends. So fairly recently, our comm sites got an update that allowed us to surface page metadata in context when we were editing the page. So we always had page metadata if we went to the site pages library and added metadata to that library. However, while you're editing the page, you couldn't see that metadata. You could only see the metadata if you went back into site pages and put it in quick edit mode. So now we have two amazingly magical properties. One is the ability to click on page details and then see all the metadata properties for the page. And then the other is we can then use the properties, page properties web part to surface on the page the properties that we associated with that page. The reason we want to do this is so that when the pages have metadata, we can now create all of these amazing roll-up scenarios to surface related content on a page, because we can say, hey, find me all of the pages that talk about Microsoft Teams on a page where you have a single topic about one aspect of Teams. Now that I've got your eyeballs on this, you may also be interested in something else. And so those are like sort of providing the Amazon recommendations for, hey, while I have your eyeballs on file naming recommendations, you might want to learn about metadata and how that works. So it really creates a really nice way of rolling up content. On communication sites, we are super excited to use this because every single client that I have wants to classify news based on the type of news, because they want to be able to feature people spotlight stories or industry news or news related to HR. And so we can actually tag our news pages with news categories and then roll up each different type differently. So hugely beneficial. So help your pages make friends, because page metadata is magical. All pages are important. They all need to have great stories. But just like Animal Farm, some pages are more important than others. And on a communication site, the most important page is the home page. Your home page is a front door for your site. And what I'm sharing here is sort of a all the new great features that just got announced this week. But at Shire, this is the template that we're giving each new communication site owner to start with. And what we've done is we've used all of the web parts that we think people would want to use, and in each starter web part is a direct link to training for best practices for how to use the communication site. So what we're doing is embedding how to write upside down, how to create a good news article, how to write all those images, all the things that comm site owners really need to know into the template that they get when they create a site. Because I really think that I love the idea of empowering anyone in the organization to create a communication site, but not everyone knows how to make a great website. And to me, the easiest thing to do is to give them a placeholder for containers that they can fill in with their content and give them some guidance about how to fill in those containers in the most effective way. One way to do that is to build it into the template and to start thinking about sort of what kind of information people typically need, your readers would need when they come to your site. There's one web part, Microsoft has a web part called Quick Links, and I've seen Quick Links on a gazillion websites. That is something, as an information architect, that just makes my blood boil, because it implies that all the other links are slow. So I hate that term, quick links. I'd rather we call it things like frequently needed content, because that's actually what it is. but the whole concept of something being quick or not quick just really bugs me. So if I'm ever looking at your sites and I see quick links, that's not quite as bad as the other thing I can't stand, which is click here. Could not be worse. That's the worst possible thing because, people aren't reading on the web, they're scanning. And if you have the hyperlink to your content under the word here, I have to read the words before and after. So it takes me more time to scan your page. And God forbid you should have a page with lots of click here's like I see all the time. That just takes too long to consume the content. And again, we need to write our stories for the reader so that they can get their work done. Yep, we want to tell our story, but we really need to think about the reader. So one way we can help the reader discover the story is by providing helpful navigation. So this is kind of interesting. One way I used to tell people, you can tell if you're on a communication site versus a team site because the navigation is always at the top on a communication site. I think that's actually not going to always be the case. So now I think the only visual cue that you will have, besides it'll say something like private group, the word group will somewhere be on a team site, is that you're going to see people bubbles on a team site who are the members of the team, and you won't see that on a communication site. It may be very difficult to tell what kind of site you're on. However, one of the best things I think we're getting, I think I just read that it's by the end of this year, to help tell stories on our sites is the mega menu to add to the navigation tools that we already have to help guide people through our content. So the one thing I think we need to advise all communication site owners is to get rid of that default navigation. I think you get home, documents, site contents, and pages, which is pretty much irrelevant once you've configured your site. Really helpful as you're building, but not very helpful at all when you're reading. So I think what we're looking for when it comes to navigation is to think not about the type of content, but about the kind of content or the topic of the content. Because no one's going to your site and saying, gee, I wonder what documents they have. What they're really interested in, I want to solve this problem. Where's the content for this problem? So there's a Microsoft released on Monday a whole collection of tools to help build your modern intranet, including a guide for planning navigation on your sites. I happen to like that one a lot because I wrote most of it, and so I really tried to sort of put all of the things I've learned about being an information architect and thinking about navigation into that document. I think I need to update it now to add more about how to plan mega menus, so look for that to come. Most important thing in your navigation is the words that you use to communicate what kind of a story that navigation is telling you. And words really matter when it comes to navigation because we don't have that extra imagery to guide us to what we're doing. So really important to have very specific targeted words that are front-loaded. So don't waste all kinds of information about our company is not as good as company information. So be consistent. And the other thing I think is really important is to have mutually exclusive labels. So they're very clearly something is either an A or a B, at least at the top level. Below the top level, however, it may make total sense to have a link duplicated in multiple categories. And again, you're only going to know that if you understand your readers and what they need to know and how they think about their work. Does that make sense? So I think it's totally fine to have sort of extra content, like sublinks in multiple places. But no one is going to come back to your site just to hang out. They're really coming to your site to get work done. So I think it's really important to guide communication site owners to really start thinking about how are we going to communicate our story in a way that gets our users to the content that they really need. And so we developed for Shire Pharma a planning template for communication site owners that they've allowed us to share publicly. And so this is one of my clients, and I did this for them, and they're essentially providing this as an asset to the community. And we've modified it over time, but I've kept it up to date so that the one that we're sharing is exactly what we are doing today, having spent the last 18 months or so working on our communication sites. And as I said, I don't ask site owners to use it exclusively. What I ask them to do is you really have to think about that site purpose, my North Star statement. I really like to see that written down because it's good to have a conversation about that. But the template itself includes a PowerPoint mock-up of what a communication site could look like so that you can kind of mock up what you want it to be to trigger a conversation. Not really to build or design the site, but mostly to have a conversation. And inside that document it's really 4 documents in one. It actually has a lot of tips and best practices that I didn't have any time to cover today about working in modern SharePoint. So there's a lot of embedded knowledge. Totally encourage you to download that and adapt it for your organization. Communication sites are absolutely beautiful. I used to be in the mode of lock them down, lock them down, lock them down. Because you can't really talk about these wonderful sites unless you also talk about governance. I really have completely flipped my thinking on that. I really think we should empower the organization to create their sites, to tell really great stories, but we also need to give them guidance and resources so that they can know how to create these sites. We have a lot of tools in the admin center that allow us to control or at least monitor what's happening, who's creating sites, where they're facing, what communication sites have been created. But if we can embed the template into the design, if we can think about providing that guidance, the reason we want to think about this is to avoid an accident in the rear view mirror. I think we want to empower people, but we want to do it smartly by doing the best we can to embed the training into the template or guide new users to that content once they've created a site. So, a few things to remember. Create the right site for the right purpose. Not every site is a communication site. I spent about an hour on the phone yesterday with an architect. Sorry. Oh, thank you. Yeah, you get so excited, you never know. About an hour on the phone yesterday with an information architect on my team, trying to help her think through, did a site need to be a communication site or a team site? And what the client wanted was a whole bunch of people to have read access to the site, but not edit access to the site. And when I hear things like that, that's starting to sound like a communication site. They also had that same 150 people needed to edit other types of content. And so it was after we talked it through, there was a pretty easy way to think about that. They needed a team site for the content on which they were collaborating. They wanted a private communication site. That same group was put in the visitor group on the communication site. So that same collection of people had one place to get work done and then another place to consume content privately that was authored for them by the team leadership. And so really need to think about the site purpose to decide what is the right kind of site for the content that I'm trying to create. Think about your users. It's really always about the users. But one of the things I've learned in trying to do this, to have multiple people with responsibility for sites, there's really 2 major users. One is the consumer of the information, but often the creator of the information is new to the web and is really comfortable creating documents, less comfortable creating pages. So we really need to empower our content creators with the superpowers that they need and the knowledge and education they need to leverage those powers wisely. I really like to plan a little bit before I start building the site. I want to think about who the audience is. I actually like to mock up on paper, but I don't always. Most of the time I will, even if it's on a napkin. I just like to have an idea of where the story is going before I'm committed. And I really do think that not only the homepage, we spend tons of time planning the homepage, but I'll give you a little tip. When you're creating a communication site, I think you really want to plan all the pages and configure the home site last. And the reason is that your home site is always, almost always, a navigation site. And when you don't have the content to which you are going to navigate, it's a lot harder to create that home page. So create the site, you're going to have a home page. Go and create or configure all of the detail pages. Then come back and wire them to the home page, because then when you pull in a page, for example, into the hero web part, the image that is the header for that page will dynamically be added to that tile in the hero web part. And you can go grab the hyperlink without having to go get it first and then keep it in your copy buffer and then paste it onto that link, because you can use the communication site to help you build the communication site. So plan the home page, but configure it last. Remember to write upside down and make sure that people understand what that means. It really means headline first, supporting details below. So most important content has to be easily scanned on the first 2 screenfuls of information. And help your pages make friends, because that page metadata is going to really allow you to tell connected stories in a really dynamic way. And lastly, think about governance, because when you don't, people will find a way to get their work done. So just give it a little thought in advance. And here are some ways that you can get in touch with me. So I thank you for listening to me, but wait, there's more. Because one of the things that I feel that I've learned is really hard for new content creators to understand is how to use all of the different sections that you get in communication sites to tell really meaningful stories. And while you absolutely can and should combine sections onto a single page, those layouts tend to work best for different types of stories. And so at the end of this slide deck, which you can download as soon as this is produced, I think it's about a day later, I have sort of best practices for each of the types of sections that are in a communication site. Like, when would I use 2 columns? When does 3 columns work? And once a single column and all that. So thanks for hanging out at 4 o'clock right before Universal Studios. And please evaluate the session. So thanks so much.